Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Are you setting goals that align with your true desires, or are you chasing someone else's definition of success? My name is Tonya Kubo, and I am here with Gwen Bortner in The Business You Really Want, the show for women who are ready to build sustainable, fulfilling businesses aligned with their values. And today we have a really important topic to bring up, which is how to create meaningful, achievable goals that propel your business forward. And Gwen, I know you have a lot to say about this. So I'm wondering, do you want to start us off with a story, or do you want to just jump right in on how you feel like every business owner needs to start with focusing on those achievable goals?
Oh no, I'm going to start with a story on this one because
Okay.
I have a
I like
favorite
your stories.
I have a favorite story. You know what my story is going to be. So when I work with clients, one of the first things that we talk about is, what does success really look like for you? And for some folks, they can get there pretty quickly, and for others, it's more of a struggle because we have been so conditioned by our environment, our family, our culture, society in general, and now even more so with social media. There's so many outside influences. Sometimes it's actually hard to know what we actually want for ourselves. I mean, it seems obvious, it seems like it would be really easy when you say it, but if you really sit down, it's like, oh, well, maybe is that really mine? I don't know if that's mine or not. And just because it is a goal that society has doesn't mean it is not your goal also, right? So I mean,
Right.
it's not an obvious kind of answer. And years ago, I started working with a gal that I actually had some familiarity with. I wasn't like close, intimate friends, but I had some familiarity with. And when I asked the question, what do you really want? Well, in this particular case, the woman was an attorney, and she said, I want to be known as one of the top kick-ass litigators in our state. And I was like, huh. I said, I don't think that's right. Now, I wouldn't normally make that kind of a statement.
I was going to say, do you actually talk to people like that?
So part of it was I knew her well enough to know that I could actually say something to her, right? I wouldn't necessarily say that to a stranger. But I also knew her well enough to know that didn't feel right as a goal for her. And the reason was she is one of the nicest, kindest, friendliest, funniest, most inviting, welcoming, warm people I know. And when you say kick-ass litigator, are those the words that come to mind? No, those are not typically the words that come to mind when you think that. And so it's like, yeah, I don't think that's right. And I said, but if it's what you really want, we will get there. That will be what we work on. Now, in her case, we worked together for quite a while before things started to shift. That's not always the case, but in this case, it took her a little bit longer. And over time, what we got to, she one day said, yeah, I was talking to this other woman, and her business model, another woman attorney, her business model is around doing estate planning and trust work. And she said, it sounds really interesting and whatnot. And as soon as she said that, I was like, oh yeah, this actually sounds like you. Because estate planning really is about creating relationship and being warm and making people feel comfortable and feeling like they're in a really trusted environment, and all of the things that she is so naturally good at. And so when she shifted to being redirecting her practice into that direction, and it wasn't an instantaneous thing. I mean, I'm not even going to pretend poof, there it went, because that's just not the way these things work. But as she moved there, she became happier and happier and happier and happier, and realized part of the reason that she had been struggling in her business was she had these goals that she thought were her goals that weren't really her goals. They were the goals that the world says is a successful attorney. You look on TV, any successful attorney is a litigator, right? That's what we believe is a successful attorney. Even though, as in almost all cases, there are lots of right answers, and that wasn't a right answer for her. This other was a right answer for her, and we, run into each other on a regular basis and chat. And when we do, it's always like, I am so happy. I love my business because she redefined success to be her definition of success, not society's definition of success.
Okay. So, oh, I have so many questions about that because, like, I'm going to ask the two burning questions I have, and then I'll let you decide how you want to take it. So, the first question I have is, well, you said that if I mean, it sounds to me even if she didn't want to be a litigator, she still could have been a successful litigator. So the first question I have is, well, why does it matter if it's the goal you really want or not, if you can still be successful with, let's say, the world's goal? The second question that I have is, like, aside from happiness, how else did her business change as a result of this shift? Because I don't know anything about attorney. I have like two friends who went to law school. We never talk about their jobs. So, like, I mean, is her business better? Is her business more successful? Or is it merely she is just more satisfied with the work? Those are all the questions I have.
So the first thing is, I think a lot of people, and probably most people that are listening to this podcast, can achieve anything, if they really, really want to. But part of it is, do you really, really want to? Are you willing to do all of the steps, the pieces, parts, the effort, the things that go with it? And when your motivation is strong enough, then the effort that it takes isn't as bad, right? And so I use this equation, and I haven't used it in quite a while, but I still really like it, which is motivation has to be greater than the force required to get the result. Because if the motivation's not there, at some point, the friction, the alignment, is going to win out, right? It's just physics, it's nature. There's some point that if we don't have enough force against the natural force, we're not going to move it, right?
Okay.
So is it possible? Yes. Would we have ever gotten there? Possibly, but man, it would have just been pulling teeth the entire time and everyone would have been miserable. And the part that's most disappointing is when she got there, she'd still be miserable.
Okay. So
right?
Really what you're talking about is you can be, let's just say, quote, successful. I will try to minimize my use of air quotes while we record this podcast as much as I can.
Oh, I like air quotes though.
But many, yes, but there are a lot of people who hate them, and the people who hate air quotes really hate air quotes. So, it's possible to achieve success, but let's not say miserable, because some people will be miserable, but not everybody will be. But to not be that happy and to not feel like the success you're having is worth what it takes to get there. Is that what you're saying?
Right. And I think this is where we find people in overwhelm. It's where we find people in stress. It's where we find people in what they will call unsustainable circumstances.
Okay.
And because there has to be, I don't really like balance, because balance is just a moment, but an equilibrium state that you're kind of moving back and forth between balance. Some days it's going to be harder than others. It's not like she never has a bad day. That
right.
I'm absolutely positive is not true, but more positive days than less positive days. That's what I'm always looking for, right? Is on the whole, when you look back over any period of time, do you say, God, that was horrible? Or do you say, yeah, that was okay. That was good. That, or man, that was amazing. I love that. But at least, yeah, no, that was good. This was an okay time. This was good. As opposed to, I hate everything that's going on. So for me, that's really where this lies, is we can achieve anything, but do we want to keep achieving it in this way, kind of into infinitum? Because if the answer is no, then it's probably not what we actually want.
Okay. And so you started this off by, saying how one thing that you do with clients that you work with, and I feel like actually this is so ingrained into who you are. You do this with anybody you're having a conversation with. Like if somebody says, I want to do this thing, whether you're in a coffee chat, you're in a networking environment, you're always, I feel like your follow-up question is always, well, why? So
Sort
if
of. Yeah, it's probably truer than not.
so it's more than just a client conversation. The importance of understanding why behind your goals seems to me to be bigger for you, at least, than just getting a client to an outcome. Like it's part of how you connect with people. I think it's part of how maybe even you develop relationships. Why is the why behind a goal so important?
Now I have 1,000 things that I want to say.
Yes, mission accomplished.
So the first reason is because I know the goal itself is not actually important, even if you hit the goal, because the goal as a moment, is a space, is a tiny fraction of existence. And typically entrepreneurs are really good at moving the goal just before they reach it. So often the goal is never accomplished. So let's just call that out right now. For me, it's about the journey, right? I want more, what I said earlier, I want more positive days than negative days. I'm not saying there aren't going to be negative days. That's just not going to be reality. But I want your business journey to have more positive days than negative days. And if we're headed towards something that we aren't really motivated for, that we don't really see it, and that we're not enjoying along the way, then so we get there. That's great. We got there, but we were so miserable along the way. And we pissed off everybody in our family, and we lost time with our children. And the list can go on and on and on. Was it worth it? Rarely is the answer yes, right? So what is the real reason behind it? What are you really trying to get toward? And the other piece of it is, and there's no judgment about that. You don't have to want $1 million business. Not everybody does. But it doesn't mean the person who does want $1 million business is wrong either. There are lots of right answers, right? And so for me, part of this whole, why is it so important, is back to my number one core value in business is context matters. All of the elements that play into your entire existence, not just the business, not just your clients, not just your product offering, but whether or not you're married, whether or not you have family, whether or not you're living a nomad lifestyle, whether you love being fully rooted in a very specific place, whether you've got parents that you're taking care of, whether you're, a dog mom to 15 dogs. I don't care what your circumstance is, but all of those circumstances play into your context and help you define what your success is. And we need to look at that wholly, or we're trying to put things in little bottles. And the businesses that I work with are typically way too small to try and isolate in any way. Everything gets integrated together. And so trying to look at it as a separate entity doesn't make any sense. We need to look at the whole picture and see how does it all work together, and will it work together? Can it work together? Can we figure out a way to make it work so that we aren't fighting it all the time?
Okay. So how do I do that? Like, is there questions I can ask myself, or are there symptoms? Like, are there signs in my business right now that let me know if I'm driving toward a goal that aligns with what I really want in life, or maybe even my values?
I'm going to answer the second question first and then come back to the first question second, because I do think there are symptoms, and I typically think it's stress and overwhelm or in a feeling like it's a non-sustainable scenario.
Okay. So burnout, or is burnout on the other end? Like you do this for too long and then you get burned out.
Yeah, burnout would be it, but it's that you've been doing this for too long.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, any of these places where the outside world looking in without knowing all of the details would say, "Hey, you look really successful," and you're saying, "Oh, it does not feel successful." Right? Whatever that is.
So
right? It does not feel
Yeah.
successful. Right? And not like on any given day,
Right.
but like it's not feeling successful for weeks and weeks and months. Right? That's the symptom. That's the time to say, am I going after the right thing for the right reason in the right way? That's piece one. So back to your first question, how do you figure it out? It really is having an honest conversation with yourself of what actually is important, and are you willing to make decisions toward that thing, which may mean sacrificing some of the other things that have historically said are your goals. And I'll just use a classic kind of example. I don't have a specific in mind, but a classic example is, I want $1 million business, and you're at, $850,000, right? Okay. So we're working and we're pushing, and we're trying to get to $1 million business, but it doesn't feel sustainable, and you're angry and you're tired, and all of the things, all of the symptoms are showing up, right? The question becomes, what does the $1 million business actually get me? Why is that defined? Why is that success for me? What does that actually get me? And then the question is, does that really get me that? Or is that what I've been sold? That's what it gets me. So for example, a lot of folks say, if I have $1 million business, I'm making more money. But reality is that's hardly ever true. People with a very small team and a successful $400,000 business often are making more than the people who have $1 million business. I mean, making more, putting it in their pocket, actually, putting it in their personal bank account. Right. And so what really is the goal there? Why is that important? What are you trying to do? And being okay with the answer that most people would say, well, that doesn't seem like success, because back to, you've got to be completely comfortable. That's what it means to me. Back to our prior example, part of what was success for my attorney was she has younger children, school age, grade school children, is she wanted to be able to be there for them and to go to soccer games and baseball, softball games and baseball games and do, be on the field trip and do a lot of these things. Well, litigators don't have a lot of control over their time because they have court dates assigned to them. Right. And so it's like, well, so those two things don't line up. Right. And, she was wise enough to know the kids are only going to be children for a set period of time.
Right.
Right. There is potentially another point in time if she really wanted to. She knows better now. She won't. But if she really wanted to be a top litigator, she could wait until the kids get a little bit older. She's not that old. She's got a lot of time still in front of her.
Right.
So there, the answer for success today also doesn't have to be the answer for success tomorrow.
Okay. So sometimes the why, the goal we have today is not the goal we have tomorrow. And sometimes what motivates us toward the goal today is not the same motivation we have later on. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Like both can change.
Yeah.
So when we started off, I talked about meaningful goals. And I think the why behind your goal definitely answers that question of how to create meaningful goals. But I'd like to shift us over into the achievable piece, because this is something I can just tell you personally, I have struggled with so much. And I'm not alone, because all my besties, we all talk about how hard this is. And so it's the balance between, we're supposed to reach for the moon so that when we fall, we can land among the stars, right? We're supposed to be ambitious. I would give you like 5 other catchphrases I've heard, but I'd rather spend our time on other things. My question is, how do you ride that line between ambitious and enough of a stretch to where I'm motivated to get up every day and do a thing, and also achievable, realistic? How do I assess the feasibility, or like what are your thoughts on that?
So, the first thing that people never realize is that setting goals is also a skill, which means when we start at it, we probably suck because we don't have good experience of setting goals. People assume that like goals are just a natural thing. They're not a natural thing. It's a skill. You learn how to get better at it over time. So long as you're doing it consistently, right? That's part of it. Is if you try it once and you set, ambitious goals and they all fail, and then it's like, oh, I'm really bad at goals, and you wait a year or two and it's like, oh, I'm going to set a goal, and it's crazy ambitious and you don't meet it. It's like, oh yeah, I just suck at setting goals. Okay, but it's practice, right? Like we talk about intentional practice. You need to be working on it consistently because you learn over time what was too ambitious and what was not ambitious enough. And when we first start, they're probably all going to be wrong. They may be way under, they may be way over. You may have some of each. It's okay. We start, but it's paying attention to where were we over? Where were we under? What assumptions did we make that probably really weren't good assumptions now that we have more data, right? And you and I worked together long enough to know I love data. Data is an amazing thing. Yay, data.
Data
And the
makes
more
me
data
happy
you
too.
have, the better you can make, you can gather information, right? And so the first set of goals, probably not very good. The second, not very good. Typically, I'm seeing around the third or fourth go, we're starting to get more accurate goals because we're starting to see what actually is feasible. I also love the concept of good, better, best goals because as you said, everyone's like, "Oh, I have this big giant, goal thing."
Oh, big,
And
hairy, audacious goal. That's
the
another
big,
one
hairy,
people.
audacious goal, which I'm not 100% against, but it
Mhm.
also can be very defeating if
Right.
if it's the big, hairy, audacious goal. And so my idea with good, better, best goals is the good goal is a goal that you should probably be able to hit about 85% of the time. It's not like all the stars have to align. It's like doing the work, showing up consistently, not having any giant unexpected disasters. You probably can hit that goal. The better goal allows you to say, okay, so this is more, I call it the 50-50 goal, that probably half the time you can hit it because it's more than the good goal. We're stretching some. And then the best goal is closer to the big, hairy, audacious goal that you're only probably able to hit it 5-10% of the time. A lot of things have to line up that you may have to have something, go viral that you weren't expecting. There's usually some unexpected elements to it to make it happen. But what it allows is that when you hit the good goal, you're not done. It's not like, oh, well, I hit it, and if you hit it in the first month, it's like, oh, well, I'm done. It's like, no, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. So you have it, but also to be able to say, yeah, I hit my goal. Because when it's always this giant goal that you're actually really only positioned to hit 5 or 10% of the time, it just ends up becoming defeating. And it's
Right.
that whole, I'm not very good at setting goals. Right. And that's not true. That's not true. So it's looking at data and being able to say, so what actually seems reasonable. And so if you're looking at an income goal and this month you made, this quarter, we like to do quarters in our world. This quarter we made $10,000, thinking that next quarter you're going to make $1 million. What kind of data do you have on that? Right? Why do you think that's actually possible? That's a giant jump. Now, maybe next quarter making 15,000, that's still a pretty big jump, but that actually feels doable depending on what you're selling. And I mean, there's all sorts of variables in here, right? But looking at it and saying, yeah, what would be a good goal? What would be a better goal? What would be a best goal? Um, and trying to be ambitious but realistic. Back to, I want people to feel success. And for most of us, success is saying, I did it.
Like I am taking all of these notes because I'm like, okay, I cannot forget all of my questions. So, okay, there's so much that you just said that I had to jot down so I didn't lose it. I mean, I think I'm trying to I think to kind of sum up what you talked about is there comes a point where you have to reality check your goal. Like a reality check comes whether you're looking for it or not. Now you had said you set goals, you don't reach them, and you eventually come to the conclusion that I'm bad at setting goals. I don't actually hear that ever. What I hear is I am bad at business. Nobody wants what I have to sell. I can't make money. I need more leads. Like I hear all of that. Like I'm a terrible person because I didn't reach the goal. And the reality check piece, I think, is so important because as you were speaking, I zoned out a bit because I was thinking through my own career and going, okay, when did anybody ever tell me what a good growth metric was? And I think I read a business book at some point that talked about like, the average business does really well when they grow 10% over the last year. Now, I cannot remember if they were telling me 10% gross revenue, 10% net profit, but 10%. And I had spent at least a decade in business before I heard that, where every coach I had worked with, every course I had ever taken was always painting this picture that I should double my revenue this year compared to last year. So I was always feeling like I failed because I never doubled. I mean, early on I doubled because it's really easy to double one.
I was going to say, so
two,
that's the thing, is that it's a
right?
really easy metric to hit the first few years. When your income is $5,000, doubling it to the next year to 10 is not nearly as hard as if your income is $500,000 and the next year you're doubling it to $1 million. Because you probably didn't get to the $500,000 in 1 year. You might have, I mean, depending, and I think that's also, it's a time metric, right? So the first year, doubling the first year to the second year is probably reasonable. Maybe even doubling the third year could be reasonable.
Okay.
But as we start going on, if you look at, I don't know, General Mills, I'm just picking, a really old company probably everyone has heard of. I am confident they don't double year over year because we would all be up to here in cereal.
And whatever else General Mills owns, because
right, yeah, I mean, they
like
own a ton
everything.
of stuff, but
right.
But you get what I'm saying. They are probably growing, and I'm just looking at like a gross income number. They're probably growing. We could obviously look it up because there's all sorts of information on the web to figure it out. But it's not doubling. That is not sustainable, right? And this gets back to looking at goals that are appropriate for where you are in business and sustainable over time. And I think this is one of the things where there's lots of people who have gotten bad advice that are then sharing more bad advice out to other people who are then sharing the same bad advice. And enough of the bad advice goes around. It's like, oh, that must be the truth.
Right. Or they become experts at teaching the bad advice.
Oh, yeah.
And,
well, that's another one of my favorites.
And I don't say that to say that they're intentionally doing it, right? It's just like that they've internalized it to the level that they believe that this is a skill they need to transfer. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground on the topic of goals, but what I like about all of this, because I think some people might listen and be like, that's a lot of talking about goals. But what I like about this is we're not talking about planning, right? Planning is separate from goal setting. They get conflated because everybody buys a planner that asks what your goals are in the front of it, I think, and that makes us think both are the same thing, but they're not. So what I like is that, you were able, I take credit for things. All I do is ask the questions around here. But
that's not an important piece of this entire equation. So let's not diminish it too much.
I will take my 50% credit where it is given. But so we've talked about the importance of understanding the why behind your goal. And, I loved what you said about it really comes down to you have to have a hard conversation with yourself. Why do you want that? What is it? And if you want it because Joe Schmo, your neighbor, wants it, that's fine, so long as you're honest with yourself that that is why you're driving toward it. It's not internal, right? There's an external force. So I think that was a really good point that I hope anybody watching or listening takes home with them. Also, that piece of how you can make sure that your goals actually align with the rest of you, right? The values, the desires. That's back to that hard conversation. But that hard conversation gives you that piece too. And then the realistic goal setting. I mean, for me personally, that's one of those things where I'm like, how often do you talk about this to me, Gwen? I mean, you and me talk like 3 times a week. You would think I wouldn't be sitting here acting like that was a big bombshell that you just dropped. But it is, because so rarely is there anybody who says, hey, before you set that goal, let's just get really clear based on your stage of business. This is what best would look like for most people. Like you said, maybe you're going between year 1 and year 2, and best might be doubling or tripling. But this is actually what's realistic. This is the average. You don't give them this pie in the sky, shoot for the moon, land above the stars, trite stuff that we hear all the time. And finally, we talked about like the worst case scenario of those misaligned goals. And all too often, and I think that, again, I'm going to speak of the women I talk to, that frustration and burnout is happening more often than not.
Oh
And
yeah. No,
I
I absolutely agree with that. That's a
and
huge one.
I would go back to, right, and nobody sees that as, oh, my goals were wrong. They see it as, I am a failure as a business owner, as a human, as a service provider, a course creator, whatever, insert title and label there. And I think that's the big disservice that we do to ourselves by not seeking out these reality checks. And I get it. You can't seek it out if you don't know it exists. So with that, Gwen, what I'd like to do actually is I would like to invite anybody listening to email me directly, actually, Tonya at everydayeffectiveness.com. Now, this is the tricky part. Tonya is spelled Tonya at everydayeffectiveness.com. And here's what I want from you. I want to know what your goal is, and I want to know why you have that goal. And back to Gwen's point, and I know Gwen will reinforce this, no judgment, right? Like you say that your goal is to only work 3 months out of the year and vacation 9 months. Like, I'm not going to judge that. Gwen's not going to judge that. But what I would love to do is have that conversation with you, and let's reality check it together. Let's bring in Gwen if it makes sense. But I think, part of why I know, Gwen, I got you so excited about this podcast, because we've alternated our excitement levels when it's come to hosting, is having this opportunity to have this conversation in a public forum to make sure everybody is understanding what's realistic, real, and average, and having the two-way conversations.
It is so important for people to hear that maybe what they're struggling with, more people are struggling with. And I know that that's been the big goal for us on this, is for us to have the opportunity to say things that maybe no one has heard before, and to say, no, that's actually reasonable. It's completely okay. And we support you in doing that. And there will be no judgment
Right.
in what you're choosing, because your choice is for you. It's not for me.
Oh my gosh. So good. Okay. So thank you for tuning in to the business you really want. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share with a friend, leave us a review, all those things that podcasters ask you to do. But most importantly, what I would really love for you to do is email me, Tonya at everydayeffectiveness.com. And if you don't have a goal you want to share, just email me and say, hey, Tonya, I listened to that episode where you asked me to share a goal, but I'm not sharing a goal. And you told me that I didn't have to do what I didn't want to do, because that works too. We look forward to joining you next time. We're going to continue looking into these key aspects of business and how they affect each other in addition to your overall business. So until next time, keep at building the business you really want. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallywant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.